I'm Jennifer Della Quadri, and this is Subtle Shifts, the podcast where you'll learn how to transform your life from the inside out, one small, meaningful shift at a time. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to share this episode with you because I'm bringing on Karen McNenny, who is a divorce coach, to talk about how to have a good divorce. So many of my clients have gone through a divorce or are going through a divorce or are considering having a divorce. And there is so much negative energy around it and fear around it, of course. So whether you have had a divorce or you are considering a divorce, this conversation takes on a different approach. And this is why I wanted to have Karen on. Not only has she gone through a divorce herself, but she helps couples go through the process in a way that is really child-centered. I know as parents, the number one thing on so many people's minds when considering having a divorce is, how is this going to impact the kids? And how can I really support them through this? And that's really where Karen comes in. As a therapist, a mediator, and a divorce coach, she helps parents really come together as a team to have a good divorce experience. And in this episode, she's going to be talking about the big mistakes parents make during the divorce process and how to avoid them. We're also going to talk about how to really have effective communication with your kids, with their teachers, and extended family through the process. She also shares tips for breaking the news to your children in a way that really minimizes trauma. She'll share also practical ways to let go of resentment, shift your mindset, and focus on growth, even if your ex is not on the same page. I have several clients who feel like their ex is not a good supporter in this phase of parenting, especially as the kids are getting a little bit older and they're in the teenage years. So this episode is really going to address that. So whether you are just beginning the separation process or maybe further along, all the way through having completed a divorce process, these insights will really help you reframe divorce as an opportunity for growth and for healing. So enjoy this episode with Karen McNenny. Welcome to the podcast, Karen. It is a pleasure to have you here. There are so many good things that we're going to be covering in this episode. Before I get into the topics, let me just give you a chance to tell my audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you for having me as your guest, Jennifer, and hello to all those in the subtle shift of life. Very happy to be chatting with you. My background, the big stepping stones are that I grew up as an actress and a dancer. And that is in the roots of my creative soul forever. But I took a hard right turn in graduate school and trained as a therapist in London, England, an integrative art therapist. As I was working as a business consultant, I became a certified mediator as I was helping with high conflict situations in the workplace. And during the pandemic, there was a shift. I became a certified divorce coach as well as a co-parenting specialist. And I now work as a divorce consultant within the Good Divorce Experience.
Your story is a perfect example of the shifts and evolutions that we go through in life. I mean, you started as a dancer and now here you are helping people through divorce.
Right? You just never know where that river's going to lead.
Yeah, exactly. So I would love to hear, what got you into this line of work? You mentioned through the pandemic, this is the transition that you made. What inspired you to start bringing this work into the world?
I'll tell you what, I think it started 15 years ago as I was looking down the path of my own divorce. And I, in short, have built the business that I was looking for at that time. And when my husband and I were facing the truth of the dissolution of our marriage, our kids were 5 and 7, and we were actively in couples counseling, as is the case for many of us, trying to save the marriage. And then it became clear that We were no longer fighting for the marriage. We were now going to fight for a good divorce, not fight with each other. And even at that time, I just thought, why are we weaponizing divorce? Divorce is not a weapon. It's a tool. Can someone teach us how to use this tool? And even turned to our therapist and said, will you keep meeting with us? She says, well, I don't know why we would. We're not working on the marriage. I said, yeah, but we don't know how to do this part. We don't know how to talk to our kids. We don't know what to say and not say. How are we going to not screw them up? How do we make a transition schedule? How do we talk to the grandparents? What do we do with our finances? And we're going to have a forever relationship. The marriage is ending, not our relationship. So how can we not do any more harm in that way? And there wasn't anyone to call.
Yeah.
So we moved into a do-it-yourself divorce that just was a rinse and repeat of every painful cycle that was existing in the marriage. We could not get ourselves across the finish line, and in the end had to hire a couple of divorce attorneys who we never met. They just started talking on our behalf, got the paperwork done, but it was 27 months from the moment we became a family that lived across two homes until that paperwork was done. And our divorce lawyers were only with us for, 2, 3 months. We didn't have much to argue about. We were very clear on 50-50. We were clear on how we were dividing the assets in the home and that we would just support our kids right down the middle. And, I just realized lawyers get us divorced. They don't help us know how to be divorced. And some of them even just do more damage to the family. Yeah. So that was 15 years ago almost. And I just carried on in my work as a business consultant until the pandemic, the great pause, the great pause of transformation for all of us. And when I think about how many subtle shifts were happening for people during the pandemic, and I was one of them, because I spent a lot of my time on the road previous to that, keynote speaking at conferences, running workshops all over the country, had clients, doing leadership training, blah, 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 blah. That all came to a very rapid stop as the pandemic came on. And there was a couple in my corporate client world who approached me about helping to guide them through their separation. And I thought, well, I certainly know a few things. And I think that Michael and I have done really well in learning how to be one family that lives in two homes and to support each other's success as parents. So I said, yeah. And I loved it. Oh my gosh, Jennifer, I right away just realized how much support we need to provide to families. Early intervention. Long before you start talking about finances, we need to talk about the family. Yeah. And that led to a late night Google search. Divorce doula, divorce concierge, divorce coaching. Oh, divorce coaching. Oh, and divorce doula. Oh, there are people who are starting to do this, and there's ways to train and to learn. And I was off to the races. It was a huge pivot in my professional life and my personal life. And for the last 5 years, I still work with corporate clients, nonprofits, government agencies, helping them get along better inside the workplace. But 2/3 of my time is helping families get along better, even in the face of divorce.
It's so wonderful that you were able to take your challenge, combine it with your expertise, and create this thing that you feel passionate about, but really helps people. And there's such a huge need for in the world. It's so wonderful to see. And what really drew me to you was the term, the good divorce. It was, it's something that you just don't hear.
Don't hear
right?
that.
Like, wait a minute, those two words don't go together, right? And there's this understanding that, and misinterpretation of the fact that divorce has to mean bad or conflict. And I know that there are people in my audience who are either in the middle of a divorce, considering a divorce, or have long since had a divorce. Their experience is all over the place. But just to kind of start at the beginning, or like one of the biggest questions that I have is, for for parents who are getting ready to navigate a divorce, what are some of the most common mistakes you see in what they do and what people have done? And my clients and my listeners can hear and think, oh, I want to make sure that I keep that on my radar. So what might be some common mistakes that happen?
Well, I think, and let me do a little caveat. I don't think divorce is good. I'm pro marriage. I'm
Yeah.
pro family. That's what I set out to do. It's what all of us set out to do. Nobody gets married thinking about their divorce. So the reality is we keep having divorces. So let's make them better and not deny the fact that they're going to occur. And the thing that comes to mind, and it was probably true in our family as well, is that we just stay too long. We stay past our expiration date. And I think about that jar of mayonnaise that we take out of the fridge and we take the lid off and we see a little bit of moldy growth, and we're like, I can just wipe that off with a paper towel, and I'm going to put the lid back on it and I'm going to stick it back in the fridge.
Yeah.
And we will keep doing that because look at this jar, Jennifer. It has lots of good mayonnaise in it. Why would I throw the whole jar out? But we know as soon as we see those first moldy spores, it's probably going bad. And if at a societal level, we could be more open to our transitions, right? To give more permission that change and transformation and growth is just part of what we sign up for. And that if we see in our hearts that things are changing, not that we just go toss out that jar of mayonnaise tomorrow, but that we maybe begin a conversation about what we need to do and what it might look like. And if people arrive at the decision of divorce and they cannot talk to each other, if they're already weaponizing their kids, if they're ready to lawyer up and take you down and I want to see you suffer, you have definitely stayed too long. You just have done so much damage, because the reality is, even though the marriage is ending, the relationship is not. That's a forever relationship from graduation to grandbabies. So why would we take divorce and weaponize it at all? I mean, we're trying to end a thing that's already not going well. Why make it worse? Divorce exists to help transform the primary relationship of the co-parents for the good, not worse. If you want it to get worse, stay in your bad marriage. It's probably going to get worse. If you want it to get really bad, go hire a couple of shark lawyers who are more than happy to drag things out and milk you for every penny you got left in that college fund and beyond. And you'll have a really bad divorce and future. But with early intervention, when maybe leaving while there's still love, right? An essence of respect and kindness and compassion and being really intentional about the process and not waiting until the whole house is on fire. Get out of that house before it burns down. So that's the first place where I think we make a mistake, is we just linger too long.
I love the perspective of that it's not the end of the relationship, that the relationship is still there. And the divorce is a circumstance that sometimes can make the relationship even stronger.
It should.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing it, is so that we can better parent our children without the toxicity and the challenge of the relationship. It's a huge paradigm shift. And I'm so grateful to share with your listeners another way to think about our approach. And it's hard. We're not good with breakups, and nobody wants to lean into divorce, and we resist it, but sometimes to our own peril.
Yeah. And I know that part of what you help parents with is taking a child-centered approach. So when the decision is made, we are getting a divorce. Would you share with us some practical tips and strategies to help keep the child at the center and hopefully navigate this process with as much ease and less conflict as possible?
Yes, and coming back to some of those first steps and where we get it wrong. Parents think we decided on a Sunday that we're throwing in the towel, so we better tell the kids Monday over breakfast. Stop! Do not do that. How we begin this process is usually how we end this process. So tapping the brakes thoughtfully, not calling the lawyer right out of the chute, but calling a coach, calling a consultant, working with a mental health professional. And from that place, one of my best practices that I encourage people to think about is your communication plan, which is not, we're going to tell the kids over dinner tonight, you go first. When I work with my clients, we'll spend upwards of 3 to 4 hours just preparing for that conversation. Not just what we're going to say, but what day of the week, what week within the month, what month within the year. And I had a parent like, but we have to tell them we've decided we can't keep these. I'm like, you've been pretending in this family for months, maybe years. You can pretend another week or two. Furthermore, the first thing your kids are going to ask you is, what's happening to the house? Where's all my stuff going to be? Are we going to have two homes? Are we moving? Do I have to give up my school? Right? Kids are allowed to be self-centered. It should be all about them. That is the very essence of children.
Yep.
Is that it's about them and they're only going to think about themselves. And that's exactly what we should be giving them. And if you haven't figured out a living plan yet, you're probably not ready to talk about your kids. And if you haven't done some uncoupling work and recognizing the reality of what's happening, you might not be ready, because otherwise you burst into tears as soon as you open your mouth, and then the kids have to take care of you. Or we have one parent sobbing and one parent not sobbing, so it must be your fault. And now we have a villain and a victim, and the kids are navigating that. No, there won't be any of that. So we talk about the when, the where. Is there a birthday party this weekend? Do we have a lacrosse game? Are the grandparents coming? Is there a slumber party? Like, being really thoughtful. And a lot of times I recommend a Saturday morning on a weekend that's quiet, so the kids have time through the weekend to process, to ask questions. And we decide what's the first 2 sentences that you're going to speak and who's going to speak those. And now let's practice. Let's have a rehearsal. This is one of the most indelible moments that become part of the story of your family. You're writing a story of your divorce. And children, I know I've interviewed adult children of divorce on my podcast. I talk to them all the time. They're like, oh, I remember I was just standing in the kitchen and my parents were in an argument. And the next thing you know, we all found out our mom was going to divorce my dad. Like, that trauma in that moment is very hard to repair, and things that were said that we didn't think about beforehand. Another moment was this couple saying, we have to tell them. And I asked them about their housing, and they said, oh yeah, we're going to sell the family home and get 2 new homes. Okay. And this was a time just a couple years ago when the housing market, at least in Western Montana, was bananas post-pandemic. Everyone was buying up everything. And I said, have you really thought this out? Because what's probably going to happen is you're going to be homeless and rich in about 48 hours. You're going to put that house on the market and it's going to sell. And then the 2 of you are going to go compete for the same houses in the same school district. So hold the fort. And we want to make sure there's a plan. So my role really starts to be communications director, project management, risk management, referee, and guiding folks through these really thoughtful, intentional, so that we know as we move into a transition schedule, that's not a light switch. It's not, kids, you've suddenly lived here and then tomorrow everything changes. I like it. Think of it as a dimmer switch. We now have a second home in our family. The whole family goes and does a field trip, including the non-residential parents. So kids know this isn't like a castle with a moat and a drawbridge, and it has to be divided. And I live in these 2 worlds that never shall cross. No, that's terrible for kids. They want their life to be integrated. They want to love both parents. So we schedule the field trip. And then maybe a week or 2 later, we schedule the first slumber party at that new house to get used to. And it's a one night. And then maybe it's a full weekend. And then maybe we start to move into our more permanent transition schedule. And of course, all of this is age appropriate. We really take that into consideration when I'm working with clients. Do you have a 6-year-old or do you have a 16-year-old?
Yeah.
That's different language, different timeline. Oh, you have both. Well, then that might be one conversation Saturday morning with the 16-year-old, and then we add the 6-year-old at lunchtime.
Yeah.
And that conversation is different. And then we get the whole family integrated. So again, the parents are the experts. My job is to squeeze the juice of their wisdom and help guide them through a thoughtful process, where otherwise they might be so full of conflict, get away, get out. They're just doing a lot of damage as they're reconstructing the family, not burning it down. This is a renovation project.
Right. And I like to think about how the impact of being intentional with the conversation, being intentional with the transition, so that yes, it is going to be a change. It is going to be different. But when the two partners are on the same page, it sounds like you really help them dial in and take out all of the guesswork. Because especially in a relationship where there's been a lot of conflict, coming to a middle ground where everybody's agreeing on when and where and how, that can be really tough. But when you bring in a third party that says, okay, we need to do this, that, and the other, let's make a plan, all the way down to the first two sentences you say and when you say them, there's a lot less stress around that. There's a lot less questioning self and guesswork because you've put time and effort into deciding what to do about it. And I just imagine the impact that would have on the end result, right? When you're talking about interviewing people who are children of divorce and the trauma of it all, how it would impact the nervous system to experience that transition in such a gentle way.
Yeah.
And the meaning, again, goes back to it can be a good divorce.
That's right. We should only be having good divorces where there is respect and dignity in the process and not leaving these families in the cave of shame, which is what happens to a lot of us. People don't know how to support us. We feel like it's all about failure. We did this to ourselves. And there's a lot of other answers about what brings us to divorce.
For sure. And you're providing this middle ground of the decision is being made and so many people want to jump to the end result. Let's get this done. Let's get this over with. Let's get the paperwork filed so we can just separate and go our own ways. But that could do a lot of damage. And so you're providing this middle ground of conversations, really productive conversations.
Oh, yes.
Intentional conversations, planning, so that everybody's on the same page. And when the child receives the information, it's coming from both people with a shared message and through the lens of this is going to be a family experience. We are still a family living in two separate homes, and this is what it's going to look like. We've got your back. We've got each other's back through this. Yes, it's going to be different, but we're all here together navigating it, and we've got you.
Jennifer, come work for the Good Divorce Experience. You nailed it.
Put me on the stage. I'll talk all about it.
Well, and you really highlighted one of those places where people get it wrong, which is the speed of things. And what I generally tell clients is we're going to go slow to then go fast.
Yes.
And that is kind of how it goes. It's this flywheel of a lot of effort at the beginning. And, the danger is that we just leap to the lawyer dividing assets. I don't even get a lawyer involved with my clients until we've written their parenting plan. Before you start fighting over a thing you're going to forget about in about 6 months or 6 years, we're going to talk about all of the elements and teach them how to be co-parents. You've worked a lot with adolescents, and there's a growing field of college coaches.
Yeah.
We're going to work with the family to get your essays together and to know when the deadlines are and how to ask for money and fill out your FAFSA and all your applications and write your essays. And because by golly, getting into college and going to college this year is really complicated and people haven't done that before if it's their first child. Well, hello. Divorce is a really big deal that people haven't done before that's going to have a big impact. So why wouldn't we also want a coach, a consultant, an expert to guide us through and teach us how to be a thriving, functional family that lives across two homes? And it's not for everyone. There are some relationships that have abuse and addiction and betrayal, and they've just been on fire for years and years and years, and that's their path. But there are so many families just like ours. Normal neurotics, good parents, no big event happening that's making this so terrible. We're just poorly married. Our compatibility factor is causing so much stress, or the lack of compatibility is creating a lot of high conflict in the home. And we know that kids being surrounded by high conflict relationships of their parents is more damaging and hard on their nervous system, as you recognize, than actually living across two homes. And children of divorce, everyone says, oh, they're going to end up in jail and they're never going to excel. And this is just mythology again. Divorce is not the thing that screws kids up.
Right.
Grown-ups acting like children and weaponizing their own kids is what screws kids up.
Yep.
Not the divorce. It's what you do in the shadow, the wake, and the light that can come from divorce. It's not ideal. It's a pain in the tush to live across two homes. But again, we can do that in ways that are less impactful on our children.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder. And I know that there are women in my audience who have already gotten the divorce. They're on the other side. They're already living in separate homes. So they might be listening to this thinking, well, that's great to know now.
Where were you 5 years ago, Karen?
I would have loved to have all of this information 5 years ago. But I'm wondering if the ship has sailed there.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for somebody who's in that boat? What to do?
I'm speaking right to your heart, ladies. It is never too late to have a good divorce. It's never too late. And your partner doesn't have to be involved in your good divorce.
That's very interesting. I want to know more about that.
So there's a component of it that's about attitude. I'm working with a couple right now post-divorce, and they just have logistical things that they need help with. And, one of those parents is really pretty delightful and at peace and going along, and it's been over a decade. And there's another parent in that situation who is still holding on to the garbage from more than a decade ago. And I remember early on my divorce, I was one of those people. I was not a happy camper. And I was grumbling one day on a walk with a friend who happens to be a social worker. So she's very wise and she's keeping me in check. And I'm like, he never, and he always, and why doesn't, and I can't believe. And she said two important things. First of all, well, Karen, last time I checked, your ex-husband is the same person as your husband. Same person. I don't know why you think it's going to be different on the other side of that piece of paper.
Yeah.
Right? And you talk about expectation being so important, and it frames what happens next. So get right-sized about your expectations. They're not a different person. And if you get caught in that cycle that is reminiscent of your relationship, you're going to just rinse and repeat.
Right.
The other thing she said is I was, rah, 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 and he never, and he shouldn't. She said, gosh, Karen, it just sounds like you are taking the poison every damn day and hoping he's the one that dies. Stop taking your own poison.
Yeah.
And that is mindset. And what we're holding on to and what we're willing to let go of. And that's part of your transition work that you do with these beautiful women, Jennifer, that we hold on to things that are no longer serving us. And when it comes to things that happened in the marriage, and of course, there's disappointments and frustrations and betrayals, all the things that led to the decision of divorce. But that marriage, I want you to think of it like an old rotten cantaloupe that's starting to get smelly, and maybe there's fruit flies, and you're just keeping it on the counter so you can go, oh, look at that gross rotten. Take the cantaloupe and go put it in the compost pile and let it churn and become something that you can put back in your new garden where you're growing, that says, hey, I came through a really hard, smelly, difficult thing, but I don't have to keep looking at it. And I certainly don't have to keep it on the counter, but I'm going to repurpose that. And I love this metaphor of that compost pile becoming fertilizer, right? This was a thing I came through, and it was hard, and it was diminishing, and it sucked my soul some days, but I don't have to keep looking at it. I certainly don't have to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to use the learning from that and put it into my new garden as fertilizer so that I grow in this more vibrant way than maybe what was happening in that relationship. And that's why we left the job, why we left the town, why we left that bad haircut, why we left the boyfriend and the lovers and all the things. And we give a lot more permission in our society to leave and change things, except in marriage.
This is so true. And that's the judgment that can come from it, and what a person is making it mean about them as a person to have a marriage that ultimately ended in divorce. That can cloud how you show up, not just with your ex, but just with your everyday life and your everyday life experience. That's taking the poison. The judgment is there. Yeah. And I really love that idea of letting it be the fertilizer and the soil of your new garden, that it's now part of you, but it's fueling you. It's helping you be who you are.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Don't leave the stinky cantaloupe laying around.
No, and also the mayonnaise. Like let's get rid of mayonnaise.
I know we got a lot of things rotten around here. You know, I wanted to come back to this sort of the shame and support, and divorce really does live in this. You failed and isolating, and we've got religious influences, we've got family influences, social influences. And I sometimes think if my husband had actually died, how my community and society would have showed up for me, how my employer, I would have been covered by FMLA. Divorce is not. I would have had probably a meal train established for me. There would have been people checking in and calling on a regular basis. But my husband didn't die. My marriage died. My family as we know it died. My identity as a wife and partner died. My identity as a full-time parent died. And those mornings and bedtimes and snuggles and organic moments that were happening every day in my life, now half of those days, they don't happen. There's so much death and grief around divorce, and people don't know how to respond. And they're very awkward around it. And sometimes I think people wonder if divorce is contagious.
Yeah.
You don't want to get too close to that family or those kids. Well, I don't even know where they're at tonight, so we won't invite them to the slumber party.
Right.
So here's my solution. For those of you who are already living in that part of your divorce, the before, the during, and now the after, we can train our society. We can train our circle of support. And sometimes we need to tell them what we need and what's helpful and what's not helpful. So going back to this communication plan, and again, if you're already past stage 1, you can still integrate this. But right alongside, when I'm working with a couple who's talking about how we're going to have this conversation with our kids, we are also doing a communication plan. How are we going to let the teachers, coaches, school counselors, nannies, babysitters, all those direct, trusted adults that are in our children's lives? Because again, if dad had died over the weekend, if the dog had died over the weekend, we would probably send an email to the teacher.
Yeah.
Hey, want you to know, newsflash, we've got a lot going on in our home, and you might notice some changes with our child. So want you to be aware, and stay in contact with us. So if you see something we should know about. So we do a full communication plan with all of those adults. Then we also do what I call the family press release, because if you know anything about marketing and journalism,
PR.
again, stay ahead of the press. Write your own headline. I recently worked with a family who was very public facing in their community. They owned a business. A lot of people knew them. It's hard to go anywhere and not be like, oh, hi, how are you doing? They're like, oh, I cannot have this conversation 200 times.
Yeah.
Or rather than people coming up to you in the produce section, hey, so I heard, what? They dodge you in the produce section because they don't know how to. So we write in concert, the parents and I, their press release. And are there 10 people or 30 people who you're going to send this to, which is usually our shared circle of friends, because many of us have an integrated social circle. It might include our parents, right? Grandma and grandpa. They're sad you're getting divorced, but what they're really worried about are their grandkids.
Sure.
So how do we educate them? And sometimes those sometimes those shadow figures want to get in your divorce. So the press release might say something like, we are very sad today to announce to you that we've chosen to dissolve our marriage. We.
Right.
And we wanted to let you know that we are not doing this in a typical fashion. Do not expect to see us in court. Do not expect to hear us bad-mouthing each other. And and then they might tell a little bit about their process. If they're working with me, they might say, we're working with a divorce consultant. Here's her website. Become educated. I have an episode on the Good Divorce Show about the supporters of the divorced couple, what to do and not to do. They might include that in their message. And we say things like, please don't avoid us, but also don't ask us why, because that's an impossible question.
Boundaries.
But please do ask how we're doing and how you can help, and no need to take sides unless it's the side of our children, because that's the side we're all going to be on. And then they get to send that out, and everybody gets the same message at the same time. And the kids know who knows and who doesn't know. So they don't have to feel like they're holding a secret or that they have to be the broadcaster of this big message. Right? So that's just like one stepping stone, the communication stepping stone. And I'm like, why wouldn't we do that with every single couple as soon as they make the decision?
Yeah.
But instead, it all happens haphazardly. And,
Right.
oh, you told so-and-so, well, I told so-and-so. And it is a space for conflict for the couple as well. And it eases them. And it really, most of the time, families who choose to do this, they get all sorts of messages immediately from their circle of support. Oh, we're sorry to hear this. Oh, we love you and your kids. Oh, thank you for sending this message. Wow, this is so beautiful. And oh my goodness, it sets the tone for everybody.
It's creating a new lens through which we can see divorce.
That's right. And
It's setting a new standard.
We need a new lens. We need to disrupt the divorce industrial complex, which earns millions, maybe billions, I think I just heard, of money off of families who are already moving from a one-income household to a two-income household. Finances are one of the primary stressors of divorce and divorce recovery. So why do we want to go squeeze more money out of them on the shoulders of conflict?
Right.
It just doesn't make any darn sense to me.
And in a situation that's already stressful,
Yes.
to add all of that extra expectation and the finances and the conversations and the judgments and the doubts, really what you're doing is helping them from the get-go alleviate all of that garbage so that they can show up and be a strong, united front for their children.
Yes. And I feel like I should come back and speak to those who are already on the other side. Because you asked me, Jennifer, what can we do? How can we support them? And that's when I got down the poison and the rotten cantaloupe and all the other things. But I believe behavior is contagious. So what are you spreading? And if you have a co-parent who's always wanting to engage in something negative or in front of the kids, a lot of times it happens at transition time. They want to rip you a new one. They want to make a model. You just turn to them and you say, oh, that sounds like a really important topic. Send it to me in an email so that I can give it my full attention, which I can't do right now.
Yeah.
And you just divert, but you don't divert in a fellow, right? Don't get their goo on you. You don't have to take that on. You don't have to rebuttal in the same way at the same energy. And this is a superpower, and it takes practice. And you might say the first time, sounds like a great question that needs more attention. Let's put it in an email. Let's save it for our monthly parent roundup. Oh, if it's really urgent, I don't have the attention it deserves right now. You just go easy peasy lemon breezy.
Yeah.
And they might get all, rah, 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 rah. Why are you ignoring me and pushing me off? But you do it about 3 times. They no longer have anything to engage with.
Yeah.
And I do see behavior change when we change our own behavior.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you can bring to the table is a spirit of generosity. And I'm going to just share a quick little story that happened in our family. And it was at a choir concert. My daughter was probably in 7th grade. And we're all in the school gymnasium. And there's Dad. And then there's our son sitting between us. And then my parents and aunts and uncles. Right? We're a whole fan club. We always sit together. I'm so proud of that for 14 years. If we can, we're always together. So when our child looks out, they just see the unity. Optics matter. And as we were sitting there, little brother, sister comes up. They're all getting in place. She's in her fancy dress. Like, oh, she's so pretty. And Dad kind of says quietly, but loud enough for me to hear, oh, yeah, she gets that from her mama.
Oh.
And my heart, it was just the softest little bit of kindness. When it wasn't just kindness, it was a compliment. Mm-hmm. And somehow we think if we're divorced, those are off the table and we're not supposed to do those anymore. Mm-hmm. And I took the bait and I turned to Son, just enough for Dad to hear. And I said, not only is she beautiful, she's a beautiful singer. And she gets all that from Dad. Oh. Because they're the musical side of the family. And right there on the bleachers of Washington Middle School, we had a moment of world peace. And I don't think it's too great to say that it's world peace, because that's how world peace grows. One relationship at a time. And if we can't get it right inside our families, how are we ever going to get it right in our communities, our states, our countries, our world? Yeah. And now more than ever, we need some peace, people. So let it begin with us.
Yes.
Spirit of generosity. And give a little compliment and kindness here. And it's like little fairy sprinkle dust on your new relationship with someone you used to be married to, and now you're unmarried from them.
Right. And that kind of brings me to the garden metaphor that you talked about. And you have this compost that's helping to nurture your new garden, and you're going to water it with that generosity.
That's right.
I love
That's so right.
And that story is just so touching and such a beautiful example of what's possible when divorce is good.
And let me be clear, husband and I, we're not skipping down Rainbow Lane every day. And our kids are now 18 and 20. We've been at this for over 14, 15 years. Yeah. Because at 18, you're not done.
Right.
It's
that's true.
Still the car and the insurance and the college and the FAFSA, and did you do your work, and you need to get the numbers, and who's claiming who for college expenses, and are you going to go to the dorm and move them in? Do we get to do that together? Are we going to get territorial now, even though and then it's going to be the wedding day, and then it's going to be the grandbabies, and then it's going to be grandma and grandpa's funeral.
Yeah.
So again, why wouldn't we do everything that we can to preserve the family, even if the marriage is dissolved? Because the family doesn't end.
Yeah.
It carries on.
Yeah. And what a great reminder to close on, that the harmony, the peace, the relationship, finding all of that begins with you. And then it extends out to the people that you interact with, your family, your community, and ultimately the world. And being able to have support through a really challenging process is something you really have honed in on. And what a gift you are to everybody who works with you. And for my listeners who have heard this conversation and are like, I want to hear more, I would love to learn more, where can my audience find you and how can they work with you?
thegooddivorcecoach.com. That's where you'll find me. And the first hour is always free with me. And you can just hit the connect with Karen. And that doesn't mean that you're getting divorced. It doesn't mean that we're going to tell your spouse that we were talking. It's a safe, confidential space to get information and explore. And maybe you do want to move down this path and you don't know how to bring your spouse on board. We'll talk about that. I'll do ghostwriting. We'll rehearse the words. I'll help you craft the email that can go to them so that they can also spend an hour with me just exploring. And the Good Divorce podcast, the Good Divorce show, again, has a wonderful collection, not only of experts who are like-minded, who are also really trying to disrupt the divorce industry and do this differently, but it's filled with a whole bunch of interviews with co-parents and individuals who've come through their transformation and how it has, the subtle shifts that they have made, the real life stories of good divorce experiences, because we hear enough about the bad stuff. So I'm here to amplify the good stuff on the Good Divorce Show.
And I appreciate all of that, as I'm sure my audience does as well. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Karen. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. If you're ready to take the next step in transforming your life, be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. And if something resonated with you today, I'd love to hear about it. Share your thoughts, tag me on social media, or leave a review to help others find the podcast. Remember, the smallest shifts can create the biggest transformations. I look forward to hearing from you.